White, and this is my persuasive speech. If I was to tell you guys that Walmart was changing their business model and they were no longer going to pay any of their workforce employees, and instead only the people that were the managers or the CEOs were going to get paid, and everyone else was going to work for free on the promise that maybe someday, if they work hard enough and get elected to be in one of those positions, that they will be able to make money at that time. But the rest of their years will be pro bono. They will be working for free. If I was to tell you guys that Walmart was doing that as a $15 billion industry, you probably wouldn't be able to accept that. You say $15 billion, that's way too much money to be not paying their workforce. And what I'm going to be explaining to you guys today is that not only would that be unjust, but there is another industry that we are all very wrapped up in that I think is unjust. So I'm going to present you guys the evidence, and I think that industry is the collegiate sports industry. Just alone, the NCAA on football brings in $1 billion just on football every year. And being a $1 billion industry, it is not that far off from the money that Walmart makes. And because of that, that means that we can compare it in the way that I did to Walmart. We would accept this not from a business, but we accept it from collegiate sports, which is another business. And now I'm going to bring to you guys the three main points to why this is unfair. The number one is that there's a disparity in the distribution of wealth. The NCAA makes $1 billion, like I said, just from football, and there are only 460,000 collegiate athletes in the NCAA right now, this year in 2020. And because of that, that means that if we were to pay each one of those athletes just $10,000, just as an example, that would only cost the NCAA $46 million, which would not even cut into 5% of the budget that they have each year from what they make grossly from the NCAA and football. And so what we see is that if you were able just to pay them at all in that way, $10,000, which would be a considerable amount for being a collegiate athlete, that would not really cut into the gross number that they are making each year. Number two that we see is that school athletics is comparable to a full-time job and a half. A 15-credit student will be in class for 15 hours, and if they're doing the work that is being asked of them, they will have about 30 hours of homework. What that means is that just their schoolwork, if they're doing it diligently, would be taking about 45 hours of their week each week, which most jobs that people live off of only take 40 hours of their week. On top of that, collegiate sports can take upwards of 20 hours out of their week, assuming they're not in a very big football team that makes them travel. It can take up to another 30 hours of their week. What this means is the ramifications is that not only is collegiate sports not paying them, the NCAA is not paying them, colleges are not paying them, and it's unlawful to do so, but on top of that, they don't have a means because of their level of activity to be able to take on a job to be able to provide for themselves while they're at school. A lot of schools can come with room and board and food, but that doesn't account for toothpaste and shampoo and all the things that can come from the living expenses that people still need to live off of when they're in college. Thirdly, the NCAA does not currently mirror the rest of the worldwide standard. If I, as a 10-year-old, wanted to go and play football, or soccer as we call it in America, in any other country, if I was good enough and I was at that level, then those clubs would pay me. Real Madrid would start paying 9 or 8-year-olds up to $60,000 a year to be able to play on one of their teams. Of course, they are the premier club in the world, or at least one of them. It might be controversial if there's any football listeners. But what we see is that the American collegiate sport industry is not only making a lot of money off of students that are not receiving any of that money in turn, but that's not how the rest of the world is shaped. We see that students are able to, at the age of 8 or 9 or 10, can start playing on a world stage at a professional level. And what we see is that the people that are really able to make that cut and maybe be a professional someday can immediately start getting paid, support their family, and be able to start to be a part of a team that is at that level. Whereas in college, we have 460,000 students that are college athletes in just the NCAA, that doesn't include the NAIA, and we see that maybe 10,000 of them, maybe, will ever become professional athletes. And because of that, there are $1 billion being made off of those students, and they're not able to represent themselves or take home any of that money for themselves. And I could share with you guys many different stories of people suffering during their college years while they're in sports, but that wouldn't quite fit the tone of this speech. So instead, I'm just going to present those three facts for you, that there is a very large disparity in the distribution of wealth. The school athletics is comparable to a full-time job and a half, which allows students to not be able to support themselves with another job, and that the NCAA does not currently mirror youth sports worldwide. I hope that was informative and might help you start dialoguing with the idea that collegiate sports are currently not the most just.